sure as you're born, but just as sure as it takes 2 eyes to make a pair. Huh? 2 eyes to make a pair. We can't quit till we get our share. Brother, we can't quit till we get our share. Doesn't make grammatical sense, but okay. Say it loud. I'm like I'm proud. You should say it loud. I'm like I'm proud. Say it loud. I'm like I'm proud. That's what there it is.
I'm Corbett Coleman from NPR News, and I am very privileged to be with you this evening. I'd like to again reintroduce our panelists, starting to my very far right. We'll begin with Dr. Mel Lewis of Cathedral College. Welcome, Mel. Seated next to her is the Reverend Canon Kelly Brown Douglas of Washington National Cathedral. In the middle is Mr. Van Newker of the Atlantic Magazine. And seated to my immediate right is the Reverend Dr. Gail Fisher-Stewart, DC chapter of the Union of BlacKkKlansman. Thank you all for being with us. I am actually going to start with the end, which I always find really shocking to watch because it just, I mean, y'all, Charlottesville was 16 months ago, and here it is in the feature film. I was just covering it. Van, you were in Charlottesville. What are your memories of that weekend?
I always have trouble watching it, to be frank, because it's knowing that this ends in death, right? This ends in a person's life being snuffed out, and there's real visceral trauma there. I think Spike, he's drawing a straight line between the fact that this movie's not just about, it's funny at moments, yes, it's a Spike Lee joint, yes, but it's not just a movie about infiltrating a bunch of bumbling idiots, right? There's a real threat of real violence to real people that has been enacted, that was enacted in Charlottesville, that was enacted in the 1980s in Greensboro. These are terrorists, and we're not talking about some rednecks coming somewhere, and you don't have to really worry about them. These are, especially with the news today in Virginia, the fact that the governor perhaps posed with someone or as a member of the Klan, that's a threat of violence to black people that was realized over and over again in people's lives, and that's what I think. That end should make everybody think about the fact that what we watched isn't, it's not farce. It's, real things have been done by these people.
No? I'm interested in the way in which this film as a real story, connected to what you're saying about the true consequences. And yes, as a Spike Lee joint, their disparity and levity, but I think that the epilogue really lends itself to a kind of deep recognition that the film is really trying to elicit from the audience. So reflecting upon Charlottesville after we have had this triumphant, exciting end to the film, and then have the shot as we see the cross burning, and are able to take that then into the Charlottesville moment. We are asked to really grapple with this idea that this is a reality in ways that we're prepared to watch the film, knowing that Ron Stallworth is a real person and that this story has this factual basis. But as we enjoy the levity and the triumph of the end, we're asked to step back and remember what that reality really means.
Yeah, I think the film reminds us, there's so many levels that are disturbing about the film because they remind us of the complex reality in which we're now living. And that the film, even though, as you say, in the end, there's this sort of triumphant moment when you have sort of the victory over the police, the racist police officer, and the shock on David Duke's face to know that he was speaking to a black person, we are reminded that it's not simply about individuals, that it's about a culture, it's about something deeply embedded in our history and in our soil. And so that you may replace the faces of individuals, but as long as that is not pulled out at its root and we don't really talk about and don't tell the truth about the white supremacy that is embedded in the very identity of this nation, it repeats itself over and over and over again. So the through line is to Charlottesville. The through line is to make America great again. As Spike Lee, of course, revealed, and I think it's one of the things about film, that you can open these issues up in a way in which people can begin to see them in a different way.
I have a question. Because when I see films like this, it brings back the same feelings I had when we first saw Roots in 1977. And I don't know what the hell is wrong with people. You know, basically, what? I can't find any other words that I can use in this place. But what is wrong with people? Because if you go back to Roots and you come all the way up through here, you see that the same attitudes, the same hate, the same racism is alive and well. And you have to ask, when will it stop? Because there's some people who feel that it has to stop. It's post-racial, right? But in reality, it hasn't. And when will it stop? What is wrong with people that the hatred of other people is such that you will kill, you will lynch, you will jail? When do we really have the true discussions that may get us away from it or lessen it? Because as a person of faith, I'm supposed to have hope, right? We're in this place, we're supposed to have hope. And I'm afraid that 30 years from now, the children and grandchildren will be sitting here watching films similar to this, asking, what the hell is wrong with people?
One of the things that I'm struck by is that in the film, Patrice makes an offhand comment, Jerron Stalwart, that I actually saw this film for the first time about 2 weeks ago. And I'm seeing it in a whole new light tonight, thinking about what she said, in that a white man will never give up power without struggle. And what I'm specifically thinking about is Governor Northam. And the reason I'm thinking about Governor Northam is because he's been told twice now by his own Democratic caucus, his own Democratic allies, the Republican opposition, the governor of North Carolina, the Democratic National Party committee chief, that he needs to step down. And he would prefer instead to just continue in office, and he's going to have a racial reconciliation tour, if I understand that correctly. He's not going to give up. This is not a Democratic thing or a Republican thing. This is about hatred.
He won't give up because he knows that although there are people who are asking him, telling him to step down, there are just as many people who are saying, what's the problem? What's the problem? Why should he step down? What does that got to do with him governing? And he knows that. So regardless of how many people call for him to step down, there are just as many out there who says, tomorrow it'll be over. What's the big deal? That was 1980.
No, I agree. There is a culture that will sustain that and that supports that. And, that will allow for, we'll see how long, and I'd be interested to hear, Van, how long this story lasts in this way, right? And so that once he has made this apology, quote unquote, or apology, denial, and whatever else. So, but what we do know is that there's a culture that has sustained this, that even allows him to think he can get away with it, and get away with the explanation, and that he even thinks that is trouble, because there's a culture that sustains it, and it's of course, it doesn't go unnoticed where all of this is taking place. Even as we have just seen this film, in the heart, right, of the Confederacy, it doesn't go unnoticed that the only other black person in Virginia that has been elected in a general election, who's the lieutenant governor, Justin Fairfax, is standing in the wings. Will he step aside for Justin Fairfax? Doubtful. So all of these issues, I think that we really have to tell the truth about what's going on here. We've got to tell the truth about what this Northam moment really represents, because it's not a moment. We've got to tell the truth that no matter what, a Ku Klux Klan uniform is not a costume. It's an act of terror against a people.
I don't want to get too sad. I don't want to get too sidetracked into Governor Northam. I want to move to another question for Mel that I have, and that's the topic of code switching. Code switching. Speaking jive and then speaking like a white person. So as somebody frequently gets mistaken for a white person. And biologically, I'm biracial. So, but where I come from, everybody talks like this. In Phoenix, Arizona. So now you know. Talk to me about code switching.
Absolutely. So I think part of the structure of the film actually is about this code switching. And I think there are three ways in which this manifests. So we have the actual language, where Stallworth is kind of saying, I can speak jive and I can speak the King's English, and on the phone I can talk to David Duke and the Klan, the organization, and no one will know the difference because I'm able to code switch. And so we have representations of the student union and jive, quote unquote, as I say. We have everything from, Black Power, the aesthetic that goes along with that. We have the Soul Train line. So that's a code that's represented in the film. And then we have the code of the organization, and we see and hear them. Hear their language, and part of their code is also we see the way in which they're militarized. We see them on the landscape in terms of kind of walking in the field and target practice. And so these codes are meant to give us this structure, give us the structure to the film. We also have the gender codes. So we have, in particular, Patrice, who's representing blackness, and her black womanhood, power to the people, is very coded. So we hear her, we see her commitments, and she's constantly articulating her political position. And then we also have Connie, who's kind of yearning for belonging, who's willing to and able to do anything, and has waited for this moment to belong to the organization. And so the way in which gender is coded is also really powerful. And so I think Spike Lee is using this idea of code switching linguistically and extending that to really illustrate these two worlds. And we have the police station kind of as the in-between, where we see these worlds meeting. And so the code inside of the officers in their barracks, in their office, in their lockers, and they have a way of speaking and a code themselves. And we're kind of meant to understand there are these two worlds, and the officers themselves are the intermediaries. So there's this switching happening throughout the film.
And there's another point that I want to ask you about. We're presented with what seems to be a fairly stark choice for Ron Stallworth. He can be a black man or he can be a police officer. And other people who are in the film who are white are not presented with this choice, not the way he is. He's supposed to be one or the other, and he has to continually explain that he's both. And Gail, I'm going to follow up with you about this too.
Yeah, they frame this conversation around Du Bois's idea of the double consciousness of the veil. And I think that's probably, Du Bois also warns against the tyranny of police, one of the first people to predict police brutality and mass incarceration in that very same work, Social Black Folk. And I think those two commentaries actually are really well together within Ron's character, right? He is infiltrating the Klan. He is doing what he believes to be good work to overturn racist elements that are infiltrating a greater system, also in the U.S. military. But he's also infiltrating the Black Power. He's going after Kwame Ture. He actually, in his real life biography, does quite a bit more on that front than he does on the Klan. And so you have these, I think, layered conflicts within not just himself, but all those students who are black radicals, they're all going to get jobs. Lots of people work jobs and have the same sort of intention. May not be as great as a police officer, but lots of people who work in banks. What about the black folks who work for Wells Fargo while they were defrauding black people in their homes? I think these are standing tensions for all African Americans who have to live in society, who have to make money, who have to make hard decisions about when and where they stand with and stand against a machine of state violence. And of course, they are embodied by black police officers. And again, we'll have this conversation, but this is a conversation I have a lot with people in D.C., with officers in D.C. This is one of the blackest police forces in the country. And you have lots of people who are undoubtedly doing great work in their communities, who are well-respected leaders locally, and still you have protests where people walk up to them and are saying, you are part of a corrupt system. And I think the most interesting conversations I've had with journalists have been with police officers. Why did you do it? Lots of them didn't say, I didn't because I wanted to protect my home, my community. So how do you deal with those tensions and walk those lines? And I don't think it's unique to police officers. I think as a journalist, how do I work in an industry where there are only maybe 10% black folks at most in the best newsroom, and they're saying
It's about 6%.
right.
What is the role of the church? It's a large question. I'll narrow it for you a little bit. In particular, what do you see your role as a theologian in communicating God's love to people who are afflicted with hatred?
This is a big question. I think, of course, we see in the movie that religion can be used for evil. And what happens when religion turns evil? I think what we simply have to understand when we talk about the church, when we talk about within faith communities, that we all start out in the same place. Most faith communities, most world religions, have at their center the thing that we call in the Christian faith tradition the sort of golden rule: do unto others as you would have them do unto you. That is germane to most world religions in some way, shape, or form. So at the heart of our religious traditions is the belief in the sacred dignity of all human beings. When religions become corrupt or turn evil is when that's violated. And I think, therefore, that we say, what do you say, what is the role of the faith community in terms of those who would harbor hate? I think we have to start there, and I like to reverse it. When we say do unto others as you would have them do unto you, I like to ask people another question, or start another way. Don't withhold from another that which you would not want withheld from yourself. So, do you want a safe place to grow into the fullness of whoever it is you are created to be? Most people would say what? Yes. Yeah. Do you want a place, a decent place to live? Who in here would say no? Most people would say yes. Do you want to be able to walk down the street and feel safe? Who would say no? And so I think when you can ask people to get back to the basics of who they are as human beings and look at what they want for, or without withholding themselves, we have to somehow connect people to their humanity and get people to, James Baldwin was right on this, that the people whose humanity is most betrayed are the people who are betraying the humanity of another. And that's what we have to get people to understand. Now, hate, there are some people, I think there comes to be a point, all we can do is to respond out of a deeper place of the respect of everybody else's humanity and a deeper place of love. We can't continually respond to or act out of places of hate, and I think there's some people who aren't going to move. And I think we just have to face that reality. But our task is to live into a different reality. Our task is to live out of a different place. And our task is to be the sacred children of God that we claim to be and treat others like that and hope that others will come along.
Last night, we watched Do the Right Thing, another Spike Lee joint. And I'm thinking, a point actually Van brought up a few days ago when we were speaking, which was, we're looking at Spike talk to us over time. Do the Right Thing was basically shot at the time, in 1989. This is a throwback to 1972, and I'm wondering, as we think about Spike Lee and his work now, I was originally thinking, how has Spike grown and matured over the years? But actually, that's not the right question. How have we, as a society, grown and matured over the years, in your opinion, to be able to receive a film like the one we've seen tonight?
I think that what Spike Lee is doing consistently is asking us to see Black people. And that has changed over time. The willingness to see Black people has changed over time, and the ability to see Black people has changed over time. And so I think when he is representing Blackness, whether or not this is, the 1970s, films in the 80s, 90s, and today, with the footage in his epilogue, he's asking us to see Black people. And that shifts and changes over time, in part, politically, of course. I think that shifts and changes also in terms of representation. And so thinking of Spike Lee as a kind of niche art filmmaker has also shifted in some ways in terms of him using this medium to represent Black people. The more representation in the medium of film that we've had access to has perhaps changed our perspective on what Spike Lee is attempting to do in representing Black people. And so the richness that he offers and the genres that he pulls from, I think, are asking us to creatively consider Blackness and the way in which that has manifested for audiences. I think in part has shifted as the political landscape has shifted, as the necessity of his messages have shifted, and also as a more access to Blackness has shifted.
Van, one of the things I'm thinking about too is Kelly was speaking about the quote from James Baldwin. I actually never wrote down it myself. In the struggle for political mastery, the Negro is the pawn. And this was decades ago. I asked this question last night. Has anything changed?
We live in an ever-changing world, so lots of things change. If you look at Spike Lee as a filmmaker, he's changed. The world he's responding to, the different cues. You look at, so the most important piece of, I think, Spike's canon is the urgency to me is Black beauty. I think Do the Right Thing we saw last night, that looks at a specific moment in Black beauty. It looks at the age of the sort of golden age, the dawn of hip-hop is pop. And that era saw, I think, for the first time, Black beauty, the idea of beautiful Black women. That's why that movie starts, Black women dancing. It starts, that's an era sort of where that penetrates the mainstream. And then you roll the clock back with BlacKkKlansman. You look at Kwame Ture's speech, and I think it's the most striking moment of that film. It's basically almost 15 minutes. They've dedicated to a whole speech, which never happens in a movie. And it's about Black beauty. Frames all these faces and hair just in like black wreaths of nothingness, almost like the Fugees album cover for the score, right? The same type thing he does there. And I think that's one thing I would actually say has changed over time, the acceptance of Black faces on some level, not nowhere near 100%, maybe 50%, but when that era was coming around and Black is beautiful was the slogan and catchphrase, that was promoted specifically to get people to accept that Black people were human and that they were able to enter spaces. And I think there has been some on that front. Again, it hasn't been nearly what we need. It hasn't been enough to stop Black children from being shot by police. It's not enough to stop public officials from dressing as Klansmen. It's not enough. But, I think it does a disservice to people who are there, who are promoting these things, who are putting their bodies and minds and well-beings and their own emotional health on the line to promote these things, to activate and advocate for certain things. And I think it does them a disservice to say that nothing has changed. And, it may be a case where I think about this in terms of chemistry, right? And in order for a reaction to take place, you have to meet the activation energy of that reaction, right? You have to pour energy into the catalyst to make something happen. And oftentimes, it's like you put all this energy into something, and finally, you put just enough in there, immediately happens. And I think that's sort of how progress happens in America. America, our racial conversation. It's lots of people pushing, and then finally a door. It's not, I think, a constant sort of 1%, 2%, 3%. It's lots of people pushing. It may not happen for a generation or two, but things happen.
Yeah, one of the things that also struck me in this film was the support that Ron Stallworth received from colleagues who were my age. Did you have trouble as a woman fitting in with men? Did you have trouble as a black person fitting in with colleagues who were not black?
Part of this movie, there's a suspension of disbelief. I mean, let's get that straight. This was a movie. And I know there would not be that collegiality that you see, number one. Number two, that type of investigation where nobody knows that's going on in that department is, that would not happen. Because you probably had Klan, the other guy who was the Klan on the department, and you think that, nobody else knows. In the 70s, we were trying to find our way. It's a little bit better now. And I think that Spike is asking us through his films, how much have we changed? As opposed to how much has Spike changed? How much have we changed to where, we see the last part of the film, and that was 2 years ago, 1 year ago, right? And we remember that. But do you remember the scene where Stallworth is in the field with the targets? Okay? Now, for most of you, you saw that, that's horrible. But in September, a female National Guard sergeant went to a North Miami Beach department range with her colleagues for target practice. And she was shocked to see that the targets that were being used were mugshots of her brother and other blacks that they had taken pictures of. She filed a complaint with the department, and the chief said no violation had taken place and that they were being used for facial recognition. So here you have this scene, the field in 1978, but then you have last week where you have mugshots, pictures of black people being used as for target practice in police departments.
I've been to gun shows, and I've seen representations of black people that are for sale. You can buy paper targets, and people can shoot as many paper black people as they like. It was a very curious and weird experience when I was there. Kelly, we're about to start questions and answers, but if you could sum up for us, what is the overarching thought that you'd like us to at least leave with as we conclude this film?
I think that one of the things that films do, and it's what's taking place here, is it opens us up to experiencing perspectives, having experiences, and seeing things that we ordinarily might not be able to see. And it opens us up to sacred conversations. And I think that it's apropos that we have this conversation in this place, because these conversations about race, racial justice, as difficult as they are, they're sacred conversations. And I call them sacred conversations because it is until we have them that we will be able to really respect and see the sacred dignity of all of humanity, regardless of the ways in which we may be colored, we may be gendered, the languages we speak, the way in which we express our gendered realities, etc. And so I think that what I'd like people to take away is the significance of these conversations, and that they are sacred indeed, and we will continue visit these places, if and